Intel is seeing its best week since 1975. Daniel, your parents were probably in college then, or very young. You hadn't even been thought of for a long time. I was 7 years old in 1975. But what on earth is going on here? I got an hour's notice to get on CNBC's Fast Money to lay this thing out. So I was literally just going off the fly here. But let me break this down. So there's two things going on. I would say primarily it's about the rumors of some sort of a tie-up with TSMC, and I'll go through some of the potential scenarios on that. JD Vance made some comments that definitely could be interpreted as Intel friendly. And then I would say the third thing is we're starting to see some very positive leaks about 18A out there. But let's talk about TSMC, because I think that was the first driver. TSMC had their board of directors meeting here in the United States, and there was some cross correlation between that. But there's a lot going on here. What I said yesterday, and it's funny, I hadn't even seen all the rumors that were out there on TSMC, is that an outright acquisition is off the table. It would be a national security nightmare. And oh, by the way, getting antitrust approval. And remember, it's not just antitrust approval in the United States. It's antitrust approval globally. That it becomes an issue. Now, what I said on Fast Money last night is I could see a JV happening. But there would need to be some intellectual property that goes into it potentially. And my gosh, they're competitors. And the crown jewels from a TSMC point of view is there intellectual property on how to move that forward. I also don't think that Intel needs help from TSMC on big die. I think 18A is from a big die perspective is looking really good in performance, good in power. Yields probably aren't as good as TSMC at this standpoint, but yields at this point are reasonable. But there's a lot of work to go. I also believe that the Trump administration is putting it in parallel an immense amount of pressure on NVIDIA, Broadcom, AMD, and Marvell to do a double take on 18A. There's also been floated a 15% tax break on technology manufactured in the United States, and a potential tariff, big tariffs that could be levied against Taiwan. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. By the way, on the tariffs, I've seen, there's no packaging done inside of the U.S., so TSMC won't be impacted by the tariffs. Come on, folks. The price will be pushed to somebody, and the end price will go up. So don't even think for a second this could be the case. I did see an interesting rumor out there about a consortium, and I've talked about a consortium before, which says you have AMD's, Marvell's, NVIDIA's, Broadcom, Apple, Qualcomm belly up to the bar and put some investment in here in addition to TSMC. But aside from cash, do you think TSMC wants to put in IP, and weighing this IP versus tariffs? Anyways, it's not clean cut here, but anyways, that's what I think is going on with Intel at this point.
So it is taking a bit of a hit today. It's down almost $1 as we speak after what's been a more than 20% run. I saw someone show year to date, Intel was up more than NVIDIA, and I think that's funny that people are doing that. But I think, Pat, you're onto a lot of what I would consider to be the important points. One, trading near book value. People have basically, when you get to that point, it basically means the company's been left for dead. It means that basically people think that the stock is worth the net sum of its assets. And, when you have 65, 70% of the PC market still, you still have a big share of the data center CPU market. You have a, massive investment in a foundry business in an era where building leading edge capacity in the US is a hot button item. There has to be kind of like hey, if I'm going to make a bet here of how much upside there might be, there's a lot of upside sitting in Intel. I also think people are appreciative of with MJ and her sort of, I think she's narrowing the scope. And I think people wanted that. Like Intel was in a lot of things. They've divested, they've spun off. She really seems to focus on protecting market share in the PC and workstation space. I actually think they got a boost from canceling the Falcon Shores. I think they actually, because people just did not believe it was going to be competitive. And I think to some extent, oh my gosh, they actually are recognizing that they can't keep serving up inferior products and expecting people to buy them. I think people want them to have a competitive data center part for AI sooner. We've tested in Signal 65, we've tested Gaudi 3. I mean, as an inference part, it's pretty competitive. It's not going to meet the software requirements to be competitive for any sort of training at scale. But if you're using it as an inference workload in enterprise, I think they've got a chance to do more with that. Is it going to be a 50 billion or even a 10 billion or even a 5? Probably not, but could it be $1 billion revenue stream for them next year? Yes. Could they learn something from that in the test chip with Falcon Shores? Yes. And Pat, I'll leave it at this. Trump's legacy is about making sure the U.S. is shored up the leading edge manufacturing. We are very closely aligned to Taiwan, but Taiwan's a risk, and he knows it. And he knows it's a risk. I think the negotiation here is to get Taiwan to bring its most advanced technology to the U.S. It's to maybe potentially share some of the critical IP. People also have to realize it's possible we're going to have to take a sidestep or a step even somewhat backwards to go forward, meaning that, all the current fabless designers are more than happy to just use TSMC. They are. They've all told me. But having said that, policy is going to be what ultimately determines whether or not more leading edge. You talked about in your post, Pat, some good content, some of the big die on 18A, some of the smaller die opportunities in 14A, bringing maybe potentially mobile parts. But to some extent, if the government basically says you have to do this, or they tariff and tax and make it so unlucrative to use TSMC, or through this kind of JV thing, make it where it's a forcing function for TSMC, Intel to work together to make it continuously be lucrative to all the fabless, I could see that happening. Right now, there's just not enough incentive. I talked to Bloomberg yesterday. They asked me, they go, what's the difference between the Biden CHIPS Act and what Trump's thinking and how he wants to renegotiate? Is that there was no teeth in the Biden CHIPS Act. There was all the money being given, but there was no forcing function to get people to manufacture more here. So I'll leave it at that. I think there's a lot of upside in Intel, not a lot more downside.